The stars burned cold in the deep black of space as the massive fleet moved through the galaxy like a swarm of metal locusts. Each ship was enormous, their hulls made of dark crystal that seemed to bend light around them. These were the vessels of the Kthvar Empire, and for 300 years they had never known defeat. Commander Zalthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His body was tall and thin, made of living crystal that sparkled with inner light. Like all of his kind, he had no face as humans would understand it, just patterns of light that moved across his head to show his thoughts and feelings. Right. Now, those lights pulsed with satisfaction. "Report on the Zephyrian sector," he commanded, his voice ringing like crystal bells in the chamber. "Complete absorption achieved, Commander," replied his tactical officer. "All Zephyrian technology has been cataloged and integrated into our systems. Their defensive strategies have been added to our database. The survivors have been relocated to designated worlds for labor duties." Zalthek's lights pulsed brighter. The Zephyrian Federation had been their greatest challenge yet. Those proud bird-like creatures had fought for almost 2 full years before their final world fell. They had been clever, adapting their tactics constantly, creating new weapons and defenses faster than most species could think, but in the end they had failed, like all the others. The Kthvar way was simple and had never failed them. When they found a new species, they studied them completely. They watched how they fought, what weapons they used, how they thought. Then the Kthvar would take all of that knowledge and make it better. Every defensive trick, every clever weapon, every battle strategy would be absorbed into their collective knowledge and improved upon. What had once been the enemy's strength would become the Kthvar's advantage. "Sir, we have identified our next target," said the navigation officer, bringing up a holographic display that filled the center of the bridge. The image showed a small star system with several planets. One planet stood out, a beautiful blue and green world that spun slowly in the display. Zalthek moved closer to examine it, his crystal body reflecting the light from the hologram. "Species identification?" he asked. "They call themselves humans. They call their world Earth. Our scouts report they are a young species, barely 400 of their years since they developed spaceflight. They have spread to only a few worlds in their local system." Zalthek studied the data scrolling past the image. "Weapons analysis? Primitive chemical rockets, basic energy weapons, simple atomic warheads. Their largest ships are smaller than our patrol vessels. Intelligence suggests they have never encountered another spacefaring species before our scouts arrived." The commander's lights dimmed with what might have been disappointment. "No significant technology to acquire?" "Limited, sir. Their computer systems are crude, their materials science-basic. However, they do show some interesting developments in theoretical physics and have demonstrated unusual problem-solving approaches. Our analysis suggests they may provide some minor technological insights, though nothing comparable to previous conquests." Zalthek nodded, turning away from the display. The humans would be another easy victory, like the Grotak or the early Valerian colonies. Those had been swift conquests, over in months rather than years. Sometimes he missed the challenge of facing a truly advanced civilization. "Fleet composition for the conquest?" he asked. "Standard overwhelming force doctrine, sir. 2,000 ships, including 40 world crackers and the full adaptive warfare fleet. Estimated time to complete conquest, 4 to 6 Earth months." "Very well. Set course for this. Earth. Inform the fleet commanders we will demonstrate standard. Mercy terms. If they surrender immediately, we will preserve their civilization for integration. If they resist..." Zalthek's lights pulsed in the pattern that meant inevitable death. As the massive fleet began to turn toward the small system that contained Earth, none of the Kthvar noticed a single strange reading on their long-range sensors. Deep in space, far from any star, something moved in the darkness. Something that, according to their instruments, should not exist. The object was a ship, but unlike any vessel in their vast database. It was large, nearly the size of a Kthvar battlecruiser, but its design was completely unknown. The hull seemed to be made of some dark metal that absorbed sensor beams rather than reflecting them. Most disturbing of all, it appeared to be powered by an energy source that their physics said was impossible. The ship hung motionless in the void, all systems dark except for minimal life support. Inside, 200 humans waited in silence. They had been waiting for months, ever since Earth's secret monitoring stations had detected the approaching Kthvar fleet. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the ship's command center, looking out through the armored viewport at the distant stars. She was a small woman with short black hair and dark eyes that had seen too much war. Like everyone else on the ship, she had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. "Captain," called her communications officer, a young man named Torres. "We're receiving the automated signal from Earth Command. The Kthvar fleet has entered the outer sensor range." Sarah nodded without turning around. "How long until they reach Earth?" "At their current speed, approximately 72 hours. "And the fleet size?" "Sensors confirm over 2,000 ships, ma'am. Just like the projections." Sarah finally turned from the viewport to face her crew. The command center was unlike anything the Kthvar had ever seen. Instead of smooth crystal surfaces and floating displays, it was filled with dozens of control stations covered in switches, screens, and blinking lights. Thick cables ran across the floor and ceiling, and the air hummed with barely contained energy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice calm and steady, "this is what we trained for. In a few hours, we're going to do something that's never been done before. We're going to make the Kthvar afraid." Her weapons officer, Commander Jackson, looked up from his station. "Captain, the quantum destabilizers are showing green across the board. The impossibility drives are ready for activation. All weapon systems are functioning within acceptable parameters of impossible." Sarah smiled grimly. The Defiance was humanity's greatest secret, built using scientific principles that most of Earth's scientists said couldn't work. The ship's engines ran on controlled quantum instabilities that should have torn the vessel apart. Its weapons fired concentrated bursts of reality distortion that could unmake matter at the atomic level. Its shields existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making it effectively invulnerable to conventional attack. The ship had taken 20 years to build and had cost the resources of 3 entire planets. It represented every desperate innovation, every impossible theory, every crazy idea that humanity's greatest minds could imagine. And now, it was their only hope. "Dr. Reeves," Sarah called to her science officer, an elderly woman with gray hair and tired eyes. "Final systems check. All impossible systems are functioning normally, Captain. The quantum cores are stable, within acceptable parameters of instability. The reality generators are operating at maximum impossibility. Frankly, I'm still amazed this thing doesn't blow up just from existing." "That's what makes it human," Sarah replied. "Lieutenant Morrison, bring us to Readiness Condition 1. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth." Throughout the ship, lights changed from blue to red as the crew prepared for battle. The Defiance began to power up systems that defied the laws of physics. Its hull started to glow with an eerie crimson light as quantum fields built up around it. In the distance, the Kthvar fleet continued its approach to Earth, confident in their inevitable victory. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed the technology of dozens of species. They had never met an enemy they couldn't defeat, never faced a challenge they couldn't overcome. But they had never fought humans before. Far below in the ship's engineering section, Chief Engineer Maria Santos watched her instruments with a mixture of pride and terror. The Defiance's engines were running perfectly, which by all rights should have been impossible. The quantum destabilizers were operating in perfect harmony. The reality distortion field was stable, and the impossibility drives were ready to do things that would make physicists across the galaxy weep. "Captain," she called over the intercom, "we are ready to make the universe very, very confused." Sarah smiled as she settled into her command chair. Around her, the best and brightest of humanity prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of not just Earth, but every free species in the galaxy. The Kthvar had conquered worlds easily for 300 years. They had absorbed the technology and wisdom of countless civilizations. They had never been defeated, never been surprised, never been afraid. They were about to learn what fear meant. As the crimson glow around the Defiance grew brighter, Captain Sarah Chen gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. "All stations, prepare for quantum fold transition. Target, intercept course with Kthvar fleet. Let's go introduce ourselves." The ship vanished in a flash of impossible light, leaving only empty space behind. But across the galaxy, sensors registered something that shouldn't have been possible. A single human ship moving faster than light itself, heading directly toward the most powerful fleet in known space. The final war was about to begin. The Kthvar fleet moved through space like a living thing, thousands of crystal ships gliding in perfect formation toward the small blue world ahead. Commander Zalthek stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display show Earth's pathetic defenses. A few hundred small ships, some orbital stations, and several asteroid-based weapon platforms. It was almost insulting. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human homeworld," reported his communications officer. "Display it," Zalthek commanded. The holographic image showed a human male in a military uniform standing in what appeared to be a primitive command center. The human's face was red and sweating, and his voice shook as he spoke. "This is Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command. We know who you are and what you've done to other worlds. Humanity will not surrender without a fight. We demand that you leave our system immediately." Zalthek's crystal body pulsed with amusement. "Demand? Open a channel." The connection activated, and Zalthek's voice rang across space. "Humans of Earth, I am Commander Zalthek of the Kthvar Empire. Your species is primitive, and your weapons are toys. Surrender now, and we will preserve your civilization. Resist, and we will take what we need from your ashes." The human admiral's face grew even redder. "Never. Humanity has never bowed to tyrants, and we won't start now." "Very well," Zalthek replied calmly. "Demonstrate our power. Target the red planet's defense stations." The fourth planet in the system was called Mars, by the humans. It had several large orbital defense platforms, armed with primitive atomic weapons. 50 Kthvar ships moved forward and opened fire. The result was spectacular. Beams of pure energy tore through the human defenses like paper. Explosions bloomed in the vacuum of space as the platforms were destroyed one by one. In less than 10 minutes, Mars was defenseless. "As you can see," Zalthek said to the still open channel, "your weapons cannot harm us. Our shields adapt to any attack you might attempt. Surrender now or watch your worlds burn." But before the human admiral could respond, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open not far from the Kthvar fleet. A massive hole in reality appeared, crackling with energy that made their sensors scream warnings. From this impossible opening came a single ship. The vessel was huge, nearly the size of Zaltek's own flagship, but its design was like nothing in the Kthvar database. The hull was dark metal that seemed to drink in light, and strange energies played across its surface. Most disturbing of all, it was broadcasting an energy signature that their physics said could not exist. "Analysis!" Zalthek commanded, his lights flickering with the first uncertainty he had felt in decades. "Sir, the vessel appears to be of human construction, but that's impossible. The energy readings we're getting suggest technology far beyond what humans should possess. The ship's power source is... Sir, according to our instruments, it's powered by a controlled quantum singularity that shouldn't be stable. The strange human ship moved with fluid grace, positioning itself directly between the Kthvar fleet and Earth. As it moved, its hull began to glow with a deep crimson light that hurt to look at directly. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel. Put it through. The image that appeared was of a human female, smaller than the Admiral, but with eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. She wore a uniform unlike anything they had seen before, and behind her was a command center that defied description. Screens and displays covered every surface, cables ran in impossible tangles, and the air itself seemed to crackle with barely contained energy. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance," the woman said, her voice calm and deadly. "You will withdraw from this system immediately, or face the consequences." Zaltek's lights flashed with outrage. "One ship? You dare threaten the might of the Kthvar Empire with one ship?" "This isn't just any ship," Sarah replied with a cold smile. "This is a human ship, and you're about to learn what that means." "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout that vessel. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing more power than should be possible to generate." Zaltek had conquered hundreds of worlds. He had faced every kind of courage, desperation, and defiance the galaxy could offer. But something about this human female made his crystal body pulse with an emotion he didn't recognize. "Destroy it," he commanded. "All forward batteries maximum. Power." 50 Kthvar ships opened fire simultaneously. Beams of energy that could melt asteroids converged on the human vessel from every angle. The barrage was enough to destroy a small moon. The energy struck the Defiance's shields and simply vanished. For a moment, space was silent except for the crackling of impossible energies around the human ship. Then Captain Chen's voice came across, the channel again, and now she was laughing. "Is that all? We were expecting something more impressive from the great Kthvar Empire." "Impossible!" Zaltek's lights flashed in patterns of confusion and rage. "No shield can absorb that much energy? What are you?" "We're human," Sarah replied simply, "and you just made a very big mistake." The Defiance began to move. It didn't accelerate like a normal ship. Instead, it seemed to slip sideways through space, moving in directions that didn't exist. One moment it was in front of the Kthvar fleet, the next it was among them, weaving between their ships like a dancer. "Sir, it's moving in 11 dimensions," screamed the sensor officer. "That's not possible." "Target it. All ships converge and fire." But the human ship was no longer where their weapons were aimed. It flowed through space like liquid light, impossible to pin down, impossible to predict. And as it moved, it began to fire back. The Defiance's weapons were unlike anything the Kthvar had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired bursts of pure impossibility. Reality itself seemed to unravel wherever the weapons struck. Kthvar ships didn't just explode, they ceased to exist, leaving behind empty spaces where proud vessels had been moments before. "Shields!" Zaltek commanded desperately. "Adapt to their weapon frequencies!" "Sir, we can't. There are no frequencies to adapt to. These weapons don't operate on any principles in our database." Another Kthvar ship simply vanished as the Defiance's reality cannons tore through it. Then another. The human vessel moved like it was alive, dancing between their attacks while delivering its own impossible firepower. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Sarah Chen watched her tactical display with grim satisfaction. Around her, her crew worked with the precision of people who knew they were making history. "Quantum destabilizers firing," reported Commander Jackson. "Direct hit on their flagship's escort group. 3 ships eliminated." "Reality distortion field holding steady," called Dr. Reeves from her science station. "The Kthvar weapons are having no effect on our multidimensional shields." "Captain," said Torres from communications, "we're receiving panic transmissions from throughout their fleet. They're trying to adapt to our weapons, but they can't understand what they're adapting to." Sarah nodded. That had been the plan all along. The Kthvar's greatest strength was their ability to analyze and counter any threat. But the Defiance had been built using principles that existed in the gray areas between science and insanity. Its weapons operated on theories that most physicists considered impossible. Its defenses existed in dimensions that conventional sensors couldn't even detect. "Bring us around for another pass," Sarah commanded. "Target their command ships. Let's see how they adapt to having their leadership structure removed." The Defiance spun in a tight arc that should have torn it apart under the stress. Instead, it moved like it was floating in calm water, completely ignoring the laws of physics. That said, such maneuvers were impossible. On the Kthvar flagship, panic was spreading through the crystal corridors. Commander Zalthek stared at his tactical display in horror as more of his ships simply ceased to exist. This wasn't battle. This was extermination. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across the fleet," his communications officer reported, his lights flickering with fear. 27 ships destroyed, 15 more heavily damaged. Our weapons are having no effect on the human vessel." "How is this possible?" Zaltek demanded. "We have the accumulated technology of 300 years of conquest. We have absorbed the knowledge of dozens of species. How can one primitive human ship defeat us?" But even as he spoke, he was beginning to understand. The Kthvar way was to take what already existed and make it better. They built upon established science, improved proven concepts, refined successful strategies. They had never encountered a species that threw out the rules entirely. The human ship didn't follow the laws of physics because humans apparently didn't care what was supposed to be impossible. They built weapons that shouldn't work, shields that couldn't exist, and engines that operated on principles that made reality itself confused. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human ship." Captain Chen's face appeared again, but now Zalthek could see something in her eyes that made his crystal form dim with a new emotion: fear. "Commander Zalthek," she said calmly, "this is your final warning. Withdraw from this system now, or we will demonstrate what human engineering can really accomplish." You cannot be real," Zalthek whispered. "This ship, these weapons, it's all impossible." Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. "Impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. And humans have never been very good at accepting limitations." Around the Defiance, space itself began to glow as the ship powered up weapons that shouldn't exist. The hull plates shifted and moved, revealing weapon ports that extended into dimensions that had no names. For the first time in 300 years of conquest, Commander Zalthek felt fear. The battle that followed changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The Defiance moved through the Kthvar fleet like a living nightmare. It flowed between their ships in impossible patterns, always where their weapons weren't. Aimed, never where their targeting systems predicted it would be. And everywhere it went, Kthvar vessels simply ceased to exist. Commander Zalthek watched in growing horror as his perfect battle formation fell apart. Ships that had conquered worlds were vanishing like morning mist. The accumulated military might of 3 centuries was being torn apart by a single impossible vessel crewed by primitive humans. "Deploy the adaptive battle spheres," he commanded, desperately. "Full analysis protocol on that human ship." The response came from his best tactical minds, the crystal beings who had studied and countered every weapon system in the known galaxy. "Sir, we cannot adapt to their weapons because they don't operate on consistent principles. Each shot seems to use different physics. It's as if they're making up new laws of reality with every attack." That was exactly what they were doing. On the bridge of the Defiance, Dr. Reeves monitored her impossible instruments with the dedication of someone who had spent 20 years learning to make the impossible work. "Captain, quantum destabilizer efficiency is at 97%. Reality distortion cannons are operating within acceptable parameters of impossibility, and the new experimental weapons are ready for deployment. Captain Sarah Chen nodded grimly. The experimental weapons were theories that had never been tested, concepts so dangerous that even humanity's most reckless scientists had been afraid to try them. But desperate times called for desperate measures. What do we have available, Doctor? Causality reversal torpedoes. They hit targets before we fire them. Temporal displacement beams. They move enemy ships backward in time until they cease to exist. And the big one, Captain, the entropy accelerator. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The entropy accelerator was a weapon that aged anything it touched at an accelerated rate. Ships, people, even space itself would rapidly decay and crumble under its influence. It was a weapon that attacked time itself. Save the entropy accelerator. For an emergency, she decided. Deploy the causality torpedoes. Let's really confuse them. The Defiance fired weapons that struck their targets before they were launched. Kthvar ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their crews never understanding what had killed them. On their sensors, it appeared that their vessels were spontaneously exploding for no reason at all. "Sir, this is impossible," screamed the Kthvar tactical officer. "Our ships are being destroyed by weapons that haven't been fired yet." Zaltek's crystal body flickered with patterns of fear and rage. In 300 years of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. The Kthvar Empire had built its success on understanding their enemies, analyzing their weaknesses, and adapting to overcome any challenge. But the humans weren't following any recognizable pattern. Their ship violated every law of physics the Kthvar understood. Their weapons operated on principles that changed from shot to shot. Their tactics seemed to be pure chaos, except that the chaos was winning. All ships, concentrate fire on. "Sector 7, Zaltek commanded. "Overwhelming firepower! Destroy that area of space entirely!" 1,000 Kthvar weapons fired simultaneously, creating a ball of energy hot enough to melt planets. When the light faded, the space they had targeted was empty. But the human ship had never been there to begin with. "Behind you," came Captain Chen's voice over the communication channel. The Defiance had somehow appeared directly behind the Kthvar flagship. At this range, not even the Empire's most advanced shields could protect them. But instead of firing, the human ship just waited. "How?" Zaltek whispered. "How did you get there?" "We took a shortcut through dimensions that don't exist yet," Sarah replied cheerfully. "One of the advantages of human engineering, we don't let little things like the laws of physics slow us down." You cannot be real. This technology, these weapons, it's all theoretically impossible." "Commander, let me explain something about humans," Sarah said, her voice becoming serious. "We've spent our entire history doing things that were supposed to be impossible. We flew before we understood aerodynamics. We split the atom before we fully understood nuclear physics. We went to space using computers less powerful than our children's toys." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of an entire species' determination. The difference between humans and everyone else in the galaxy is simple. When faced with the impossible, most species accept it and find another way. Humans look at the impossible and say, "Hold my beer." Around them, the battle continued to rage. But it wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of what happened when human creativity met alien certainty. The Kthvar had their perfect formations, their tested strategies, their accumulated wisdom of 3 centuries. The humans had a ship that shouldn't exist, weapons that violated reality, and the absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. In the depths of the Defiance, Chief Engineer Maria Santos monitored her impossible systems with the calm of someone who had learned to make miracles routine. The quantum cores were stable, the reality generators were humming smoothly, and the impossibility drives were operating exactly as designed, which is to say, they were working despite the fact that they couldn't possibly work. "Captain," she called over the intercom, "I'm showing massive energy readings from the Kthvar fleet. Looks like they're powering up some kind of superweapon." Sarah nodded. She had been expecting this. When conventional weapons failed, desperate enemies always turned to their ultimate solutions. "Analysis, Dr. Reeves?" "Scanning now, Captain." "Oh my. It appears they're charging some sort of planet-cracking device. Theoretical yield in the range of several stellar masses worth of energy. Captain, that weapon could destroy entire solar systems." Time. "To charge?" "Approximately 4 minutes." Sarah Chen had spent her entire career making impossible decisions. She had been chosen to command the Defiance not just for her tactical skills, but for her ability to think in ways that no sane person would consider. Now she had to make the most impossible decision of all. "All stations prepare for maximum impossibility," she commanded. "Dr. Reeves, bring the entropy accelerator online. Chief Santos, I need everything the quantum cores can give us. Commander Jackson, target their superweapon with everything we have." "Ma'am," Dr. Reeves said quietly, "using the entropy accelerator at full power could affect local space-time in unpredictable ways. We might accidentally age ourselves out of existence. Or we might save the galaxy," Sarah replied. "Besides, when has unpredictable ever stopped us?" The Defiance began to glow brighter than a star as its impossible systems reached maximum output. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ship as it prepared to unleash weapons that attacked the very foundations of existence. On the Kthvar flagship, Commander Zalthek watched his sensors with growing desperation. The human ship was doing something that made his most advanced instruments scream in electronic agony. Whatever they were preparing, it was beyond anything in the Empire's vast database of threats. "Sir, the human vessel is generating energy fields that shouldn't be possible," reported his science officer. "The readings are off all known scales. It's as if they're preparing to weaponize reality itself." "Time to our weapon discharge?" 3 minutes, sir. "Can we accelerate the process?" "Not without risking a core overload that could destroy half our fleet." Zalthek's lights dimmed with resignation. For the first time in his species' recorded history, a Kthvar commander was genuinely unsure of victory. The humans had shown them something they had never encountered before, a complete disregard for the limits that governed all other intelligent life. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human ship." Captain Chen's face appeared one more time, but now her expression was deadly serious. "Commander Zalthek, you have exactly 2 minutes to withdraw your fleet from this system. After that, we will demonstrate what happens when you threaten humanity's home." "You cannot destroy our entire fleet with one ship," Zalthek protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "You're right," Sarah agreed. "We can't destroy your entire fleet." She smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Zalthek had ever seen. "We can do something much worse. We can make it so your fleet never existed in the first place." The entropy accelerator was humanity's ultimate weapon against the impossible. It didn't just destroy its targets, it aged them backward through time until they reached a point where they had never been built. It was a weapon that attacked history itself. 1 minute, Commander," Sarah said softly. "Choose wisely." Around them, space itself began to tremble as two impossible forces prepared to collide. The Kthvar superweapon that could crack planets, and the human weapon that could unmake the past itself. For the first time in 300 years, the outcome of a battle was truly uncertain, and in the depths of space, other ships were moving. Human vessels, small and primitive by Kthvar standards, but crewed by people who had learned an important lesson from the Defiance. Sometimes the impossible was just another word for not yet tried. The galaxy was about to change forever. Commander Zalthek stared at the countdown timer on his tactical display. 30 seconds until the Kthvar superweapon fired. 30 seconds until a beam of pure destruction would tear through space and eliminate the impossible human ship that had brought chaos to his perfect fleet. But as he watched, something else appeared on his sensors. Then another something, then dozens of them. "Sir, we have multiple contacts emerging from the asteroid belt," his sensor officer reported, his crystal body flickering with confusion. "Human ships, sir. Lots of them." The vessels that appeared were nothing like the sleek, impossible Defiance. These were crude, blocky ships that looked like they had been built in shipyards and mining facilities. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, passenger transports, and even what appeared to be converted space stations. None of them should have posed any threat to the mighty Kthvar fleet, but they were all heading directly toward the alien armada. "Analysis," Zalthek commanded. "Sir, these appear to be civilian vessels that have been hastily converted for combat. The modifications are creative. That cargo hauler appears to have mining charges strapped to its hull. That passenger transport has what looks like industrial cutting lasers mounted on improvised weapon ports. And that mining ship?" The officer paused, his lights flickering with disbelief. "Sir, that mining ship appears to have turned its entire ore processing facility into some kind of projectile cannon. On the bridge of the converted cargo hauler, Lucky Strike, Captain Martinez watched the massive Kthvar fleet with the calm of a man who had already lost everything. His ship had been hauling supplies between Earth's outer colonies when the Kthvar scouts first appeared. He had watched from a distance as his home on Europa was evacuated, his family loaded onto refugee ships and sent into deep space. Now he and his crew of 12 were flying a ship loaded with mining explosives directly at the most powerful military force in the galaxy. It should have been suicide. Instead, it felt like justice. "Captain," called his navigator, a young woman named Singh, who had been studying to be a teacher before the war started. "We're receiving a transmission from the Defiance." Captain Chen's voice filled their tiny bridge. "All human vessels, this is Captain Chen. We are about to engage the enemy superweapon. When we do, they will be vulnerable for approximately 30 seconds. That's your window. Make it count." Martinez smiled grimly. 30 seconds. That was more than enough time for a cargo hauler to reach ramming speed. "All stations, prepare for maximum burn," he commanded. "Singh, plot a collision course with their largest command ship. Rodriguez, arm all mining charges for proximity. Detonation. If we're going out, we're taking some of them with us." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of human ships. The passenger transport New Hope had been converted into a guided missile, its life support systems repurposed to create a massive chemical explosive. The mining vessel, Deep Digger, had turned its ore processing equipment into a kinetic bombardment system, preparing to fire chunks of asteroid at relativistic speeds. Even the converted space station Haven was moving toward the battle, its fusion reactors rigged to overload in a controlled explosion that would make a small star. These weren't professional warships. They were ordinary people who had decided that some things were worth dying for. On the Kthvar flagship, the countdown reached 0. "Fire!" Zalthek commanded, the Empire's most powerful weapon discharged with the force of a collapsing star. A beam of pure annihilation tore through space toward the Defiance, carrying enough energy to crack planets and shatter moons. The beam struck the human ship and simply vanished. Not reflected, not absorbed, vanished, as if it had never existed at all. The Defiance hung in space completely undamaged, its impossible shields having negated the most powerful weapon the Kthvar possessed. "Impossible," Zalthek whispered. "Your turn," came Captain Chen's voice over the communication channel. The Defiance fired its entropy accelerator. The weapon that aged things backward through time struck the Kthvar superweapon. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive device began to change. Its sleek crystal surfaces became rough and unfinished. Its advanced components became primitive prototypes. Its perfect construction became scattered blueprints and raw materials. The superweapon was aging backward, becoming less and less advanced until it finally ceased to exist entirely. Where the Empire's ultimate tool of destruction had been, there was now only empty space and floating debris. But the entropy beam didn't stop there. It spread outward, touching dozens of Kthvar ships. Each vessel it reached began to age backward, through time, becoming progressively more primitive until they too ceased to exist. "Sir, we're losing ships throughout the fleet," screamed the tactical officer. "That weapon is unmaking our vessels. They're not being destroyed, they're being unbuilt." That was when the human civilian fleet struck. The converted ships hit, the Kthvar formation like a swarm of angry hornets. They were slow, clumsy, and armed with improvised weapons that shouldn't have posed any threat to advanced alien warships. But there were dozens of them, and they fought with the desperate creativity that had always been humanity's greatest strength. The cargo hauler Lucky Strike rammed directly into a Kthvar cruiser, its holds full of mining explosives detonating, in a brilliant flash that tore both ships apart. The passenger transport New Hope became a guided missile, its makeshift warhead punching through alien shields that weren't designed to stop suicide attacks. The mining vessel Deep Digger fired, chunks of metal and rock at incredible speeds, turning space debris into kinetic weapons that hit with the force of nuclear bombs. "Sir, the human civilian vessels are using kamikaze tactics," reported the Kthvar communications officer. "They're turning their own ships into weapons." Zalthek watched in horror as his perfect formation dissolved into chaos. These weren't professional soldiers following established military doctrine. These were ordinary beings who had decided to fight back against impossible odds, and they were winning through sheer refusal to accept defeat. "Adapt to their tactics," he commanded desperately. "Sir, we can't adapt to chaos. They're not following any recognizable strategy. Each ship is fighting differently, using improvised weapons and suicide tactics that change from moment to moment." That was the genius of human warfare that the Kthvar had never encountered. Where other species developed standardized military doctrines and stick-to-proven strategies, humans treated every battle as a chance to try something new. They turned cargo ships into bombs, mining equipment into weapons, and desperation into victory. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Chen watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The Kthvar fleet was powerful, but it had been designed to fight conventional enemies using predictable tactics. They had never faced an enemy that treated the laws of warfare as mere suggestions. "Captain," called Torres from communications, "we're receiving signals from across the system. More human ships are joining the battle, and, ma'am, we're getting reports from other star systems. This is spreading." Sarah felt her heart leap. "Explain." "The battle is being broadcast across subspace. Other species that were conquered by the Kthvar are seeing what we're doing. They're starting to fight back too. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived under Kthvar rule for generations were seeing something they had never thought possible. The Empire's forces in retreat. On worlds that had been conquered decades ago, resistance groups were emerging from hiding. In star systems that had been stripped of resources, oppressed populations were rising up. The Kthvar had ruled through the certainty of their own invincibility. They had conquered because no one believed they could be defeated. But now that myth was being shattered by a single human ship and a handful of converted civilian vessels. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from across the Empire," the Kthvar communications officer reported, his lights flickering with panic. "Uprising on Kepler 7, rebellion in the Centauri sector. The Zephyrian survivors are attacking our occupation forces. It's happening everywhere." Zalthek stared at his tactical display as more red warning indicators appeared. His perfect fleet was being torn apart by improvised human weapons, and across the galaxy the empire that had stood for 300 years was beginning to crumble. "How?" he whispered. "How can one ship cause all of this?" "On the Defiance, Captain." Chen heard the question through their open communication channel. She looked directly into the camera, her dark eyes burning with the fire that had always driven humanity forward. "Because we showed them something they had forgotten, Commander. We showed them that the impossible is just another word for not, yet tried. We showed them that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say no to change everything." She paused, watching as another group of human civilian ships joined the battle, their improvised weapons and desperate courage turning the tide against impossible odds. "You conquered worlds easily because no one believed you could be stopped. But you made one mistake, Commander. You tried to conquer humanity, and we have never been very good at accepting defeat." Around them, the battle raged on. Kthvar ships with technology beyond imagination fell to human vessels armed with mining equipment and powered by sheer determination. It was David and Goliath played out on a galactic scale, and David was winning. But Commander Zalthek had one last card to play. Deep in the Empire's core worlds, the ultimate fleet was being assembled. Ships that had never been defeated, weapons that had never failed, and commanders who had conquered entire galactic sectors. The real war was just beginning. The message that went out across the Kthvar Empire was simple and terrible. All fleets return to Sol system immediately. Bring everything. For the first time in 300 years, the Empire was calling in every ship, every weapon, every resource they possessed. World crackers that had destroyed planets, flagships that had never known defeat, and weapons so powerful they were normally kept in deep storage were all heading toward one small blue world. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display as wave after wave of Kthvar reinforcements arrived in the Sol system. The original fleet of 2,000 ships had been reduced to fewer than 500, but now they were being joined by vessels from across the galaxy. "Captain," reported Dr. Reeves, her voice tight with concern, "we're reading over 10,000 ships now, with more arriving every hour. Some of these vessels are, well, they're reading as small moons in terms of size and firepower." Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this. When you hurt a bully badly enough, they either backed down or came back with everything they had. The Kthvar Empire had chosen to double down. "What's our status?" she asked. "The Defiance is operating at 60% efficiency," Chief Engineer Santos reported. "We've pushed our impossible systems beyond their theoretical limits. The quantum cores are stable, but I can't guarantee how much longer they'll hold. The entropy accelerator is showing signs of temporal fatigue, and our reality distortion field generators are starting to phase in and out of existence. How long can we keep fighting? At current engagement levels, maybe 6 hours before our impossibility drives suffer catastrophic existence failure. 6 hours to defeat the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Sarah had faced impossible odds before, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Around Earth, space was filling with alien ships like a metallic storm cloud. World killer. Weapons were powering up, reality-bending devices were being deployed, and enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems was focusing on one small planet. But humanity wasn't facing this alone anymore. "Captain, incoming transmission from the resistance fleets," Torres called from communications. The main screen filled with images from across the galaxy. Zephyrian bird warriors in their sleek fighters, Grotak heavy cruisers bristling with weapons, Valerian stealth ships phasing in and out of visibility. Dozens of species that had been conquered by the Kthvar were now fighting alongside humanity. "This is Wing Commander Veltar of the Free Zephyrian Fleet," announced a proud bird-like creature with brilliant blue feathers. "We have 300 ships ready to die for freedom. Tell us where you need us." Battle Chief Gromax of the Grotak Liberation Army reporting, growled a massive reptilian being. "We have learned much from human tactical broadcasts. Our ships are ready to ram the enemy if necessary." One by one, representatives of every species the Kthvar had ever conquered checked in. They brought ships that had been hidden for generations, weapons that had been secretly developed, And most importantly, they brought the desperate courage that only the oppressed could understand. "Captain Chen," said a voice she recognized. Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command appeared on screen, his face showing the strain of coordinating a defense that shouldn't have been possible. "We've got 600 more human ships ready for battle, civilian vessels, corporate transports, even some old museum pieces we've managed to get running. They won't win any beauty contests, but they'll fight." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she looked at her tactical display. Humanity's ragtag fleet of converted civilian ships was being joined by equally improvised vessels from across the galaxy. Mining ships with improvised weapons, cargo haulers loaded with explosives, even passenger liners converted into ramming vessels. "All ships," she broadcast across the growing Alliance fleet. "This is Captain Chen of the Defiance. Today we face the largest military force in galactic history. They have better ships, better weapons, and 300 years of conquest behind them. But they've made one crucial mistake. They've given us nothing left to lose." She paused, looking out at the stars that had always called to humanity's wandering spirit. "The Kthvar Empire thinks they can crush freedom through overwhelming force. They think they can break our spirits by showing us how hopeless our situation is. They're wrong. Hope isn't about having good odds. Hope is about deciding that some things are worth fighting for no matter what the cost." Across the fleet, beings from dozens of worlds listened to the small human woman who had shown them that the impossible was just another word for not yet tried. "Today we don't fight for victory," Sarah continued. "We fight for the right to exist as free beings. We fight for our children's future. We fight for the idea that tyranny will never be allowed to stand unopposed. And we fight because someone has to show the galaxy that there are still those who refuse to bow." The Kthvar attack began with a display of overwhelming force designed to break the spirit of any resistance. 1,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a storm of energy that lit up space like a new star. The barrage was enough to destroy entire fleets, to crack moons, to boil away the atmospheres of planets. It struck the combined resistance, fleet, and was met by shields, armor, and desperate courage. Ships were destroyed by the dozens, but for every vessel that died, 2 more pressed forward. The mining ship Iron Will took a direct hit from a planet cracker beam and exploded in. A ball of nuclear fire, but not before ramming its target and taking a Kthvar dreadnought with it. The Zephyrian fighter wing Storm Dancers flew directly into the alien formation, their small ships weaving between massive enemy vessels while their pilots sang ancient war songs. But it was the Defiance that turned the tide. Sarah's impossible ship moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, its reality-bending weapons tearing holes in space itself. Where other ships fought with conventional tactics, the Defiance fought by rewriting the rules of engagement. It fired weapons that struck their targets yesterday, deployed shields that existed in next week, and moved through dimensions that hadn't been invented yet. "Captain," called Dr. Reeves, "I'm reading massive power buildups from the Kthvar flagship. They're preparing to deploy something big." Analysis. It appears to be some kind of galactic range weapon. If I'm reading this correctly, it's designed to sterilize entire star systems simultaneously. They're not just trying to win this battle, they're preparing to commit genocide on a galactic scale. Sarah felt ice run through her veins. If the Kthvar activated a weapon like that, it wouldn't just destroy the Resistance fleet. It would eliminate every free world in the galaxy, leaving only enslaved populations to serve the Empire. Time. To activation? 10 minutes, Captain. Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. "All stations, prepare for maximum impossibility override," she commanded. "Dr. Reeves, I need everything our quantum cores can give us. Chief Santos, reroute all. Power to the entropy accelerator. We're going to do something that has never been attempted before." "Captain, what are you planning?" Dr. Reeves asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. "We're going to age their entire fleet backward through time. All of it. At once." The silence on the bridge was deafening. What Sarah was proposing was beyond impossible. It was insane. The entropy accelerator had never been used on such a scale. The power requirements alone could tear the ship apart, and the temporal paradoxes it would create might unravel causality itself. "Ma'am, Chief," Santos said quietly, "that will require us to overload every impossible system we have. The ship won't survive it." "I know," Sarah replied calmly, "but neither will they. And sometimes that's the best trade you can make." Around her, the crew of the Defiance prepared for their final mission. They had all volunteered for this, knowing it would likely be a one-way trip. But they had also known that some things were worth dying for. "All resistance ships, this is Captain Chen," Sarah broadcast to the fleet. "We are about to attempt something that will either end this war or destroy us all. When we give the signal, I need every ship to target the Kthvar flagship and fire everything you have. We get one shot at this." The Defiance began to glow brighter than a star as every impossible system pushed beyond their theoretical limits. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ship as it prepared to weaponize time itself on a scale never before attempted. "Captain," Torres called from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kthvar flagship." Commander Zaltek's image appeared on screen, his crystal body flickering with patterns of rage and desperation. "Human, you don't understand what you're doing. That weapon could destroy everything. The temporal paradoxes alone could unravel the timeline." "You're right," Sarah replied calmly. "It could destroy everything. But you know what? That's still better than letting you destroy everything first. You would risk the entire galaxy on an insane gamble?" Sarah smiled, and in that smile was 300,000 years of human evolution, of a species that had climbed down from trees and decided to reach for the stars. "Commander, let me tell you something about humans. We've been making insane gambles since we first decided to leave our caves and see what was beyond the horizon. We gambled that we could fly. We gambled that we could split the atom. We gambled that we could reach other worlds. And every time, people said we were crazy." She leaned forward, her dark eyes burning with the fire that had driven humanity across the cosmos. "The difference is, we're not gambling for conquest or power, we're gambling for freedom, and that makes all the difference." The entropy accelerator fired. Time itself became a weapon, as the Defiance unleashed forces that attacked the very foundations of causality. The beam struck the Kthvar flagship and spread outward like ripples in a temporal pond. Every ship it touched began to age backward, their advanced technology becoming primitive, their perfect construction becoming rough prototypes, their very existence beginning to unravel. But the strain was too much. The Defiance began to come apart as its impossible systems finally reached the limits of impossibility. Hull plates peeled away like flower petals, revealing the quantum fire that had always burned at the ship's heart. "Captain," Chief Santos called, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We have maybe 30 seconds before complete structural failure." Sarah nodded, watching as the entropy wave continued to spread through the Kthvar fleet. Thousands of ships were aging backward through time, becoming less and less advanced until they simply ceased to exist. But there were still thousands more, and the wave was slowing as it expanded. "All ships now!" she broadcast to the resistance fleet. Every vessel in the Allied fleet fired simultaneously. Human mining lasers, Zephyrian plasma cannons, Grotak, kinetic projectiles, and weapons from dozens of other species converged on the Kthvar flagship. The combined barrage struck just as the entropy wave reached the enemy command ship. The result was spectacular. The flagship didn't just explode. It unraveled through time, taking with it the galactic genocide weapon and any hope the Kthvar had of victory. The temporal shock wave spread outward, and everywhere it touched, the Empire's forces simply ceased to have ever existed. The Defiance died as it had lived, doing the impossible. The ship that had rewritten the laws of physics finally succumbed to the paradox of its own existence. But as it faded from reality, it left behind something more important than any weapon, proof that tyranny could be defeated, that freedom was worth fighting for, and that sometimes the impossible was just another word for necessary. In the aftermath, as the surviving Kthvar ships fled in panic and the galaxy began to taste freedom for the first time in 3 centuries, monuments were built not to the Defiance's weapons or technology, but to the 200 humans who had shown the universe that some things were worth dying for. The war was over. Freedom had won. And humanity had proved once again that the most dangerous thing in the universe was a human being with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The galaxy would never be the same.